Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to King County Recovery Conversations. I want to thank the King County Behavioral Health and Recovery Division and King County Recovery Coalition and Orbit Audio for allowing us to be here today in this wonderful studio. I want to welcome my guest, George Spellman. George is one of my dear friends, somebody that I consider to be probably one of the very few mentors that I have in recovery. This is somebody who I'm not sure that I would be here without. Yeah, he's my queer auntie. He's a dear friend, and I'm grateful to have him here.
Could I have us start that just one more time?
Oh, yep.
I had one weird little audio blip.
Yeah.
And I figure if we
We'll
restart it.
We'll start over.
I'm supposed to restart it.
Just not quite enough smoke.
Yeah, the intro's not...
Right. One more time.
Yeah.
More gusto.
Yeah, I've got to really dial up the intro. Okay. Okay. How much more can I build you up?
Right? It's like, it's going to be a letdown after that.
Nah, I can do it again.
Okay.
All right. Hi, everybody. My name is Christopher Archiopoli, and I'm your host today for King County Recovery Conversations. I want to thank Orbit Audio, King County Behavioral Health Recovery Division, and King County Recovery Coalition for allowing us to be here today. As my guest today, I have George Spellman, the lovely and talented George Spellman. I consider him to be one of my dear friends. This is somebody who is a mentor of mine in recovery, one of really three people, I would say, that is a recovery mentor for me, somebody who I consider my queer auntie and a great friend, and someone who is probably a better storyteller than I know. I can't think of anyone who tells a story quite the way that you do, George. I don't know if they're all true, but I know that they're there. They're good.
I guess that's the mystery. Thank you, Christopher.
I love
What
that.
a lovely intro.
Yeah, so I will let you
How are you?
introduce. I'm great, thank you. Thanks for being here.
It's good to be here.
So do you want to introduce yourself to the people listening and watching? Just kind of tell us a little bit about who you are and the bottom line of your recovery story.
Okay, sure. Happy to. My name is George Spellman. I'm 66. I live in Seattle. I've been in recovery most of my life. I found recovery at 25 in San Francisco in 1984 and enjoyed a long run of sobriety. I was suffering from alcoholism, and I had a relapse at 10 years and then got sober again for a while. And then I moved, 9/11 happened, and I left. I'd left San Francisco and gone to Oregon. 9/11 happened, and there was just nothing left for me there, so I came to Seattle. And that puts us in 2002. I went to a circuit party with some friends in New Orleans. They were just normies, and I was in recovery. So when they went out clubbing one night, I stayed at the Airbnb. And we'd rented a big place, big house. But one of the guys had dropped a bumper on the sofa, and I found it. And so I just, no one's looking, right? And while the cat's away, I was feeling some FOMO. Mm-hmm. I had been clean and sober for a long time by this point again. And all my friends were out at this lovely party, and we were in New Orleans, and I was just sitting by myself, happy and sober. And it just didn't feel right. I was feeling robbed and alienated and lonely, and so I thought I deserved it. So I tried it, and I didn't know what was in it, and it was meth. And oh my gosh, it just changed everything for a while, right?
Had you not done meth up until that point?
I had never done meth up until that point.
So your drug of choice up until that point was alcohol?
It was.
Okay.
And yes. And so the fact that I relapsed on that was like crazy for me. But
Is it a relapse if it's new?
right? It's really
If you're trying a new
not.
mistake, is it really a relapse?
Well, that's good. And it just opened the door to my drug of choice, which was alcohol at that time. But, it came in a sad second very quickly.
Yeah.
Right? It just, meth has a way of taking over one's life and personality, and all the things that were important were no longer important. Yeah.
Yeah. It's that drug.
It's that drug. It felt, honestly, Christopher, it felt like when I started doing it, when I got back to Seattle after that weekend was over, I came back and I still had that bumper and I was still doing it. And I met somebody online and they said they had more. And that made me feel a little more comfortable because I was about to run out, and I don't like to run out of anything.
No, absolutely not.
And this was my new best friend. I'd known it for 3 days and I hadn't slept yet, and I wanted more. So a new friend came over to my house in Lushai, and he stayed with me a couple of days and introduced me to other modes of other delivery systems than a bumper.
Yeah.
And I took to it really quickly. And it felt like I had put every worldly possession I had in the back of a pickup, got on a dusty, bumpy road, and started driving. And the further down that road I drove, Christopher, the more things fell out of the back. Friends, people, places, and things that I loved. As they would fall out of the back, I would just say, well, were they really that important to me? I kept writing things off, pieces of my life. I just kept saying, okay, I'll make it up to them at Christmas. I'll make it up to it. I'll go to their next wedding, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because there's usually a second or third.
There is. My mother was married 7 times. So in my experience, there's always more.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I can always make it up to people, right?
Yeah.
What I discovered was I can't. It's like, what I've learned is when that's happening, is to just stop the truck, roll up the windows, and let the consequences and dust catch up with you. Sit it out, and get out of the truck and start over.
So how did you do that? I mean, because obviously, you're down this dusty road, everything's gone to heck,
Yes.
but you're here today. You're in this chair, you're with me, we're having a conversation. So obviously you didn't stay on that dusty road. Like something shifted. You found your way to a new place if it wasn't the old place.
I did.
How did you do that?
Well, I had a couple years before I cratered and bottomed out, I had been to a local bathhouse, and there were flyers for something called Crystal Clear, and it was a precursor to Seattle Counseling. Did it, I think, with the public health department, but I had hidden that brochure in my sock drawer, so it had been there for about 2 years, thinking on one rainy day I may need this. And sure enough, it rained.
Yeah.
Right. And I checked it out. I was not afraid of recovery because I'd been in AA years before for 20 years of my life at that point. So I wasn't afraid of going to recovery. I was afraid of letting go of meth. And to my surprise, it didn't want to let go of me. Right. And so I needed help, so I went there, and that put me on a journey of recovery with a group called Strength Over Speed, and I've been with them for, 20 years now. I did relapse again later on my journey. It's tricky. It is really tricky, but I found my way back, and the doors were always open.
Well, and we know each other from Strength Over Speed, from SOS. So and that's the great thing about SOS, is that, the door is always open. There is no shutting. There is not even like a little bit of peeping through. I mean, it is open wide for anybody to come back to, no matter how long it's been, no matter what has happened in between visits.
Yeah.
And I think it's very different.
That's the magic.
So I know that you have a really strong foundation in 12-step recovery.
Yeah.
And SOS is very different than 12-step recovery. How do you sort of balance those two things? Because I know they don't always meet in the middle, and there's a lot of contradiction.
They don't, but growing up queer, I think I did a lot of code switching. Mm-hmm. And so I made 12 steps work for a very long time, and I didn't like all the God talk, and it was very floral. The big book is written in a style. You could tell that the authors, had been born in the late 1800s. Mm-hmm. It was a very different style of writing and speaking, but it worked for me because I needed it too. And then SOS was very different, and that was a place where I realized there didn't have to be. It wasn't necessarily a linear path, and there was an understanding of the struggle. And there was a shame-free zone around it. Mm-hmm. So piercing the veil and walking back into the door at SOS was very different than walking back into AA and saying, I'm George, I'm an alcoholic, and I have one day. There was none of that. It was like walking in the door and coming home to a hero's welcome, and none of the shame. And so it made it so much easier to, when I did stumble in the beginning, to get back in right away, and we just held each other up. That's where I met you.
Yeah, I mean, I remember, very distinctly, it was probably shortly after you sort of coming back from that second relapse that you talk about, when I was coming in for the first time.
Yeah.
And I remember listening to your stories of like what you were going through at that time. And I remember the word methy. That was, I thought that was a very clever thing that you said. That was one of my first memories of Georgisms. And that's really stuck with me, this idea of being methy.
We get methy.
Right.
We get really methy.
And things can look methy. It's more than messy. It's methy.
There are layers and layers of meth. In my old cottage, it was just, I see photos of just my environment, my living environment, and what it was like at the worst of it, and what I considered acceptable. The bar had lowered so many times that it was just so foreign to me now. When I look at that, it's like I don't know who that was. I really did lose track of who and what I was, and I didn't think I had. As things fell out of the back of that truck, I just kept writing them off as if I didn't need them. And I didn't realize how much I had given up and how much had changed in me during that. And so coming back from that, as you know, I mean, it is a hard reboot, just trying to find interest again. I lost so many of my passions and interests, due to that drug.
Yeah, and how do you sort of come to terms with that? Because, all these things are in the back of your truck and they're all bouncing out, and some things stay in, and, there are things that stay with you through this process and make it on the return journey. But there's a lot of things on the side of the road that you'll never find again.
Ever.
You might find a few, and they might be a little dusty, and you might be able to put them back into the truck. We're just going to continue this analogy for our entire time together.
Exactly. Hang with this metaphor. I like this one.
But how do you sort of come to terms with that, with the things that you've lost that you can't get back, the people that you've lost that you can't get back, that will never forgive you?
The grief was great. It was not easy. I was so mortified and shamed by the experience that when I wanted to reconnect with my old friends who I'd kind of said goodbye to and let fall out of the truck, when I wanted to reconnect, I found it very awkward and uncomfortable, and I found a million reasons not to, and to dodge them and live our lives apart from each other. This last week, I went home to Oregon for a memorial service, and it was one of the dear people that had been part of my circle back then, and they had known me for 20 years, I guess. And most of that time I had been sober, and I'd taken care of their children, and, we just had lives together and done a lot of traveling together. So after my experience in Seattle with meth, I kind of wrote those people off until this last week, and when I went back, and it was lovely. And I don't think I needed to suffer that loss as much as I did. I mourned that for a long time, and pride and ego and shame and embarrassment kept me away from them. And they were waiting with open hearts.
Well, I mean, I think that word shame is a huge part of the grief that we suffer in recovery, or even while we're in our addiction.
Yeah.
Is this internalized shame of what we're doing and what we've done, the stigmatization that society places on us, that looks at us as people in addiction as less than, or all of the terrible words that get flung at us.
Yes, and even a person in recovery all those years, there's a hierarchy, and meth is way down at the bottom, right? If you're sober in AA for a long time, you're high on the needle, right?
Yes.
But if you find meth and get high on the needle, it's a whole different story. And there's a lot of shame that I had piled onto that. I had my own. It's just like with homophobia. I had my own internalized values, and meth was not a good one, right? So there was just so much personal damage, so much of abandoning my own self, my own values and my goals. So it was hard to come to grips with that, because I did that as a knowing adult. It's not like I stumbled into it with peer pressure and kids, as a child. I didn't. I did that with alcohol. I didn't stumble into meth as a doughy-eyed kid,
Well, and how did you come to terms with that? I mean, I know that's sort of, for myself, I know it's an ongoing process. Even when I think I've fully assimilated it into myself and I'm okay with who I am and proud of who I am, then I'm all of a sudden not. What is that process like for you?
It's very similar to what you're describing. It ebbs and flows. The way I feel about it. What I've found is it is like any recovery. I can reach out for help and find fellowship and find support. But if I just keep coming and taking and leaving, pretty soon it gets pretty dry and pretty flat. So what I had known about recovery was it meant nothing if I didn't, unless I shared it, unless I gave it away and started getting busy and feeling useful and find a purpose within this, because I'd lost all value and purpose in my life at that point. So once I'd gotten stabilized and had built some community, I started volunteering and reaching out and helping others and meeting others and taking an interest in newcomers. And that made all the difference. Finding that my worst stories could be of value to somebody else. Spinning that crap into some kind of useful gold, was the secret for me. It gave me purpose again.
Yeah, it's interesting how it kind of it rears its head from time to time, though. I know that I punish myself, like if something bad happens, I think, well, I deserve it. This is for all the things that I did, there's karmic points that I haven't earned back yet. And, every time I think like, oh, this bad thing is happening. Oh, it's probably because of something I did. And, I think back, like, have I evened the score yet?
Right. I would like to submit that we have.
I think
we have paid
right.
all the dues we need to pay, right? And it's like, so when something bad happens, I try to hold myself in a more gentle way now. It's like, no, I don't have this coming. Something bad happened, and we'll clean it up. We'll do what we have to do.
Well, and I think part of that being gentle with ourselves is having community like this, having a group of people, whether it's large or small, who understand what you've gone through and who you can say like, hey, I'm feeling this sort of way.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure it's because of like the shit that we did.
Right.
What do you think? Am I being crazy or?
No, I think you might have a point there, right?
Yeah.
It's like, I think I've been there. And here's what I did.
Right.
Here's what I do. Right. And let's talk about it. And that fellowship, that support has meant everything. Without it, I don't think I would have wanted to continue this journey. There had been so many disappointments, by that point. I don't know, without the love and brotherhood of our recovery group, I don't know that I could have found a way forward.
Yeah. And then, I said earlier that I feel like you and, Tony and Mark are, reasons that I'm alive, but, that is sort of connected to SOS also. And I don't mean that euphemistically. That's not an exaggeration. Like, I really don't think that I would have survived this without finding you and without finding the people connected to that group. And there is a magic to what SOS does.
There really is. There's a secret sauce there. Mark and Tony were there when I got there, and Mark had just shown up, and I had shown up, and Tony was there, and it was new, and but it had a simple idea, and it was that shame-free zone that was created in that group that made it so accessible and so loving that it works. There's some magic to that, and I've not seen it replicated in any city I've been to so far.
Not even in this one, really. I can't think of any other group or organization that has anything that quite meets what SOS has managed to do. And, SOS, part of the magic is that, nonlinear recovery, harm reduction base, door always open.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong you can say as long as it's not hateful.
Right.
As long as there's no isms, like nothing you're saying is going to surprise us. No war story is one of us is going to be able to one up you or at least meet it.
Right. It's like, oh, is that all you got?
Yeah.
Yeah. Right.
Girl.
Yeah. Oh, it's like, it always makes me happy to see how people reclaim their narrative, though, when they get back.
Yeah.
And, in 3, 6 months, 9 months, how they take a hold of that and lives change again. And they start filling their truck, and all of a sudden they have keys again. They have the keys to the car, the keys to the apartment, instead of just a locker somewhere, they have life.
Right.
And signs of life, and there's joy.
Yeah, it's beautiful to watch.
It is.
I guess one of the other things that I've always enjoyed about that group, and in particular watching, people like you, and kind of what taught me that how to be in recovery is the beauty of how we allow people to come into that room on day one or maybe day 0. Like maybe they have no hours of recovery. Maybe they are still not doing so great.
Right.
and I think there's, even though it's wonderful when we all sit together as brothers and, are able to have a great conversation about the meaning of life and, the world. Some of the most beautiful meetings are when we all sort of gather together to support somebody who is in, maybe unhoused, maybe in the middle of crisis.
Yes.
And, as long as they can, maintain themselves in the room in a non-disruptive way, we're able to support them. And I think that's really something you taught me, something Tony and Mark taught me, and something beautiful that probably wouldn't happen in a 12-step room.
No, I don't, I think there's a grace that I discovered there, and you taught me so much about being gentle with people and how to, when you started leading groups, I saw how you could find the grace and the words to be gentle with somebody who is struggling. And it was so loving and so tender. And I'm a little saltier than a lot of people. So it's like, you've always had a way with words that were just so kind and so respectful. And I watched that, and there was just so much finesse. It made it easy, I think, for the people that you were talking to feel safe and supported and welcomed. And I was more of a sink or swim, right?
Well, who doesn't like a little sweet and salty?
Right. So it's like,
that's the best. Those are the best snacks.
Right. It's a variety pack. There's, with all of us aunties together, there's something for everyone.
Yeah, all the flavors.
Yeah, but one of us will be helpful. Yeah.
Well, we're getting close to the end, but there's one topic that I wanted, one last question that I wanted to cover with you. Now, you said you've been in and out of recovery since 1984. Is that the year that I heard? Okay.
That's the year.
There's probably some people watching that were not even alive at that time.
Maybe one or two people.
She looks good for her age.
I was 5.
Yeah, she started early. But what are some of the things that you think have changed about recovery from 1984 to now 2025? What's different and what keeps you engaged?
Well, if you ask my home AA group that meets Thursday nights at 5, not too late, not a goddamn thing has changed, Christopher. But no, what has changed for me is my whole idea of what recovery is. And that it is nonlinear, that it is just a part of the narrative of my life. And when I quit doing the things that maintain my recovery hygiene, when I quit going to support groups and meetings, when I quit helping somebody else, when I get so self-involved and self-centered that I don't see what's going on around me, because that's what addiction does, right? It wants to cut us from the herd and help us isolate and make us believe the myth that we are totally alone, and we're not. So what's changed for me in all that time is that whole concept of what recovery can be, and that it's not a marathon, and it's all of those days in between those bad times that constitute my life, and there's a whole lot of life in the last, 40 years that has spent sober and not on drugs and happy and useful, So that's what's changed, I think, is just the way we view recovery. What it is, what addiction is, that there's no morality really involved. There's, it's we have to take a more holistic view of what's going on.
I agree. I read a great article that SAMHSA published earlier, or a blog post earlier today that SAMHSA published about how do we reduce shame and stigma, and a lot of what you said was mirrored in that. So
Lovely.
Look at you.
Look.
Pearls of wisdom as always.
Well, I hope it was helpful.
Well, it's always helpful for me, and can't speak for anyone else. But
Well, it was fun for me.
I can always speak for myself, and I enjoy every moment. And this is truly one of the gifts of recovery, being able to do this with you, and being able to be in this room together right now. So
That is so very kind, and I love you for this. I appreciate it. It's like I am so happy to be walking down this path together.
Me too.
Yeah. Thank you, Christopher.
Thank you for everybody that's been here today for King County Recovery Conversations. Want to thank again Orbit Audio, King County Behavioral Health and Recovery Division, and King County Recovery Coalition for allowing us to be here. Thanks so much. And thank you, George, for being here with us today and sharing your story.
Thank you, Christopher.
Thank you.